cheap tea?
No, like at the restaurant, we had like
Oh, you tried those.
All right, hopefully at this point, you're feeling a little bit more comfortable with your camera and the settings. I hope that the exercises that you did for today's assignment got you using a few different settings on your camera. And hopefully what you learned today, maybe this exposure compensation, things like that, you're going to give a try too also. So now we're going to kind of switch gears back and talk about landscape photography or taking scenery photos. And we're going to go back to some basic composition rules that can help tell your story, and then we're going to add in some of the camera things that we learned also. So in general, if you're going to be good at this, you have to have the right equipment and know how to use it. And I have the word right in air quotes because what's the right equipment? If you're walking around with a $30,000 camera or a $30 camera, the right equipment is the one that is in your hand, right? Because that's what you're out with. So it's not that you have to keep buying bigger and better cameras to be a good photographer. You just have to know what you're doing and how to use your camera the best you can. Granted, better cameras, better lenses do yield better results, but you can't always blame it on the camera. Any of you that have SLR cameras, do you have friends that say, oh, no wonder your pictures are so good, you got that fancy camera? It's like saying to somebody, man, this meal you made was great. You must have the best oven. You're lucky. I don't have a good oven. That's why my food sucks. Not really. You got to know what you're doing with it, right? You have to understand how to use the tools you're given. It's having a good camera. I can have a nice camera and be on auto mode my whole life and be afraid to try anything, and they're no different than a point and shoot or your phone. So having the right equipment is important, meaning know how to use your camera. Do your homework and scout out locations that you're going to take pictures of so that you find good angles and the best lighting situation. And then luck can always play into it too. If you happen to be out shooting and the sky gets real crazy, cool clouds, rainbows, that's not something that you can plan. On Tuesday at 6, I'm going to go out and I'm going to get a rainbow. You know, that doesn't work. So also remember that depth of field is what's going to tell your story in landscape photography. What's in focus, what isn't, what do you want the viewer to focus on? So the first rule of thumb that really works for landscape photography is the golden hour, or the golden rule. And that's typically shooting early in the morning or later at night. And dawn, 15 to 30 minutes before the sun comes up, and up to like an hour after is some really good light. It's really low on the horizon, really warm and pretty. And then at night, 30 minutes before sunset and up to 30 minutes after. Or if you're doing like senior photography, you tend to go out late afternoon to get that good sun, not necessarily just right before sunset. So in the golden hour, things are warmer. You get that yellowy glow to it. You get that cool backlighting. Water will tend to be calmest in the morning. Usually that's when you have your best shot of getting nice, calm water, not the crazy water. And it's just a time of day. This golden hour is really very popular with landscape photography. So how do you know when the sun is going to rise and set? If you are around home, we kind of know, but if you're traveling, there's apps. You can go on Google. You can find out when is the sunset, or in some cases, huh?
AccuWeather.
Yeah, weather tells when sun is setting also. If you're in places that have mountains, just because sunset is at 7 at night, when the sun goes behind the mountain and you're right up against the mountain, it might be, you know, cloudy, or not cloudy, shady at 5 o'clock. So you have to kind of think about this. So here are a couple of portraits also using that golden hour time period. So they just look warmer. I'm actually going to share my screen with you guys who want it, because you'll be able to see these things a lot better on your screen. So what composition rule that we talked about do you see being used here?
ISO.
I'm hearing lots of bleh. Somebody yelled out.
Rule of thirds.
The rule of thirds, that grid of thirds, where the subject is not dead center. We talked about moving your subject off center on purpose to make your photos more interesting. And that grid of thirds, or rule of thirds, is the tic-tac-toe thing. And your subject matter falls in one of these 4 intersection points. Okay? It has nothing to do with the top third, the bottom third, it's these intersection points. So moving your subject off center using this grid of thirds really helps improve your landscape photography. So think of having something in your scene that you can use for that purpose. So if you go down to the lake, maybe you get down low and there's a piece of driftwood, and you can have that in that lower right intersection point to bring in some foreground also. Another thing that's really going to help with landscape photography, again, it's nothing to do with action. We're not thinking about shutter speed. We're going to shoot in aperture priority mode. That way, our aperture controls the depth of field. What's in focus? Everything or just certain things? So f8 or 11 tends to capture things as the human eye sees them, because unless you're bionic, there is a point where we can't see crystal clear in the distance, right? Everything kind of fades off. So that's a good, f8, f11 is a good thing for landscape when you want everything in focus. Always keep your camera, I would say, on auto ISO or intentionally on a low number when you're shooting landscapes, because you're outside with natural light. You're not shooting a landscape in a really low light situation where you'd want to boost up the light by upping the ISO. You want to keep it looking like it looks in real life. Keep it looking dark, sunsetty, sunrisey, whatever. So shoot at a low ISO. All right. Kind of a cool picture. What makes this kind of cool? Yeah, it's got the foreground, right? You have something in the foreground. Somebody else might take this picture standing up just a little higher and get all of these looking like this, and it would just be kind of eh. The sky is kind of ugly, but it's kind of cool, right? They got enough definition in it to really capture all the different colors of the sky. So it's kind of a low contrast photo, but it's really pretty cool. So the important thing that you have to remember with landscape is foreground. This is the part that amateurs forget all the time. So get something in your foreground. Get down low. It helps give depth to your image. Where do you put your horizon line when you take landscape pictures? Not necessarily in the center. All rules are meant to be broken, don't get me wrong. But walking out to Lake Michigan and getting half of your shot be sky and half of it be water and a little beach is boring, unless the sky is fantastic. But even then, put your horizon line down a little bit lower. Change the composition. Focus, get the person's eye to draw into what you want them to see. The reason it's so low here, does it kind of give you the feeling of laying in this meadow, looking at the cool blue sky? Yeah. This one, they really wanted to focus on this cool beach area, or where the water was coming in. The sky's pretty, but they kept it to just a third, and they focused more, they gave more weight in the picture to this. Also, the grid of threes, if we were to do that, you know, this is a lower right and lower left intersection point. There's not really a subject in here that we put there, but we're giving the perspective of laying in the grass and looking up at the sky. So if the sky is ugly, again, don't go half and half. Don't show half ugly sky if it's that gross. Put your sky up higher. Get less of it in your scene. And then the break the rule, make the rule, break the rule. Anytime you have a cool scene like this where a reflection is so awesome, yes, your horizon line can go dead center. And there are other times it can too. But in general, think about how you could compose the shot differently to get the horizon line off of that dead center point. Also, if you go and take pictures, especially of the lake, I want you to look at them and make sure that it's flat. Because I would challenge any of you that have ever taken a picture of Lake Michigan to look at it now, and I bet money it's tipped a little bit. No matter how hard we try, it's crazy. So in Photoshop, we can fix that real easily, no doubt, but try to get it straight when you're taking it right off the bat. There is an option in on your viewfinders on your camera that shows you like a level on some cameras, or it just puts up that grid and you can see, you know, here's the grid. Why is my water above it on one side and below it on the other? I need to switch my camera angle. When you're out shooting landscape photography, clouds are your friend. They help hold color, except on days when we have all clouds. It's pretty ugly. But they really help hold the color and have a white point in your picture so that your camera's white balance, which is probably set on auto because you're outside on a normal day, not a cloudy day. It helps it know, you know what, this is white, so I can give this a little bit more of the yellow color that it has because it's backlit. I know that, you know, this is a true white. True white is here, but the clouds help. Another big tip for landscape photography is to shoot from angles that we don't typically see. So if we walk out and stand out there and have our camera up at about the 5-foot level and take a picture into the woods, pretty boring, right? That's just a snapshot. What if we got down on our belly and had our camera in the leaves and took some shots like that. Or somehow we got up really high and we looked down on the forest. Those are different angles. Flowers and weeds, and if we ever get anything alive out there, are fun subjects to take pictures of. This is Queen Anne's lace, that pretty weed. And with my camera, I tried just holding it underneath, and I put it on aperture priority mode on a really low number so that it would blur everything. And I held down the shutter until it, you know, zzz. I figured it was eventually focusing on the right thing, and I just took it. I had no idea until I looked at the screen if it worked or not, because I didn't physically get down underneath there. I was just holding the camera. But it's an angle you don't normally see. We see the top of those all the time, right? So,
like the white little umbrella.
yeah, the pretty little flowery, yeah.
It looked like a palm tree.
So take some fun pictures. Have fun. Do some different things. So different perspectives. We talked about that. Getting really low out in the leaves. So in the fall, it's really pretty. Look for reflective surfaces. Shoot wide, shoot narrow. That means wide angle lenses and then zoom in on things. Get a variety. Shoot in both portrait modes. So wide angle and tall. If you're shooting fall foliage, and eventually we'll get to this, I used to teach this in the fall and it made a lot of sense then, but the best time to go out is in the early morning because you have that dusk, you have that golden hour still going for you, but you also usually have some dew left over or rain, and to find a raindrop or a dewdrop on your leaves in the fall in that pretty yellow light is just a really cool scene. So it's a calm, nice time to go out. Also, when taking landscape photography, every now and then you have to put a thing or a person in it to really get the size and the scale to come through. So the redwoods, you know, I don't think unless you've been there, you can, and I haven't, I just can't comprehend how big these trees are until I see my friend in front of them or their whole family in front of them. And they're still not around the whole tree. They're huge. So every now and then you do have to put something in the image that really helps show that size and scale. Something that we know the size of, like a vehicle or a human.
That fell over?
Huh?
Is that a redwood that fell over?
I assume so. Anybody been out there? See that? Have you?
Yeah.
Amazing?
They're huge.
Yeah, they're like 300-something feet tall.
I just can't comprehend. I can't. Okay, don't let bad weather scare you off. A day like today would actually be like a senior photographer's dream for some photos because there is no, it's like all diffuse light. There's no harsh shadows whatsoever. So they're not going to get those cool backlit photos that you would on a sunny day during the golden hour, but you can go out and get a shot where their face, everything is equally lit. There's like a big diffuser over the sun, and it therefore is giving us a good clean light. Foggy days can be really fun, so especially in the fall, you know how we get those days where the fog is coming up off the fields or off of the lakes and ponds, and the rest is crystal clear. It's a really fun time. So think about that. Don't let days like this hold you back from getting some good shots. But the key with landscape photography is thinking about the light and letting the light tell your story. So these are some pretty spectacular photos, largely due to the lighting being just right. This one in the woods, obviously the person is shooting towards the sun. And if you ever, especially with film photography, when I was little, like the rule of thumb was the sun had to be behind your back. And whatever you're shooting at, therefore, was being lit up. Well, on a sunny day, like think of a baseball team, if your sun is to the back, they're all looking straight into the sun. And they're squinting, or they have baseball caps on, and their faces are all in the shade because it's really bright. So shooting into the sun is really awesome. You just have to set your camera differently. So if you're shooting into the sun, your light meter in your camera is going to say, wow, this is a bright scene. I'm aiming at the sun. I've got to make it darker and darker. And then you get this back, and it's too dark. You don't see any detail. That's when you have to override your camera and do those exposure compensations or something else, or different metering. Maybe meter to get a good light reading in here so you have detail in the shadow, and then take the shot. You have to kind of trick it, work around. So again, try shooting into the light, having the light behind you, looking down, looking up to the light. Just different angles of light are really going to tell your story. Shooting a sunset picture. So anybody with a point and shoot, in your scene modes, I bet you found one that was a sunset or a sunrise, right? So that's going to do a couple of things. It's going to understand that it's low light and that that's what you're going for, so it's not going to try to brighten it up. and it's going to make your images more warm, red, yellows, oranges. So if you have that, use that. If not, with your or with your other cameras, where are you going to meter to get a good sunset? Where you get detail still, it's not totally silhouetted or darkened out. So if we metered on the sun, way too bright, burn a hole in our retina, right? Don't look at the sun, you're not supposed to do that. If we metered over here into this mountain, and that would say, I want good exposure on this, so it would brighten it up, it would give us detail in here, it would brighten up the whole scene, therefore this would all get bright, and our sky really wouldn't show the beautiful color that it has. So you basically meter somewhere in between, like in this zone, hold down your shutter halfway, lock in your exposure over here, or hit that exposure lock button, and then recompose your photo how you want, but it's going to have the light metering based on in here. You can look at your LCD screen. It can be sort of accurate, but we learned not perfect. But if you look at your histogram, you're going to be able to tell if you have any blown out points or any too many black points. You're going to have a lot because if you're going for a silhouette, you are going to have black points, right? That's okay. So you're kind of targeting in the middle point. And then we're back to shooting weeds into the sun and getting that cool backlit look. What priority mode was I on when I took this? What? Aperture priority. Portrait mode if that's all you have to get down to a low aperture, but aperture priority mode because that's the only way I got the depth of field. I said I want a depth of field of 2.8. I want this in focus. Things that are closer to me can be out of focus. Things that are farther than that can be out of focus, but at this level, I want these items in focus. Beyond it get blurred, closer get blurred. The only way you get that is aperture priority and using a low aperture number. Okay. Another really good tip for landscape photography is the use of leading lines, just like we talk about in every design principle. So think about paths, roads, fence lines, anything that can lead your viewer in through your photo, your landscape photo. There's some settings within your cameras when you go in the menu on the back of them that can, in camera, make your landscape photos even more vibrant. They're shooting modes is what they're called. It only works in JPEG, so if you're shooting in camera raw, these are not going to be an option. On Nikon, in your shooting menu, it's called Vivid. That's going to give you even more vivid landscape colors. On a Canon, in your shooting menu, the picture style is called Landscape. Other things that you might find in here are black and white, sepia, couple things like that. And what that would do is, in camera, it would take and record the picture as a black and white only. Or take and record it as a sepia, which is like a brown and white, old school black and white. I would recommend you not do that because what if it's the best shot of your life and you only recorded it black and white? You know later in Photoshop you can make it be a black and white, right? So I wouldn't necessarily shoot in that mode. I've never gone into these. I've been happy with the color I get no matter what. Plus I know I'm going to play in Photoshop a little, so I don't change my shooting modes, but you can. Just want you to know that. Also in not only portrait shots, but even in landscape shots, watch for unwanted items that are in your shot. So this would be, it's not pretty now, but it could be a pretty landscape, but there's an ugly sign in the way, or there's somebody's soda can in the way. Don't tell yourself, I'll fix it later in Photoshop, because that takes time. Anytime you can remove something from your scene or walk 2 feet in a different direction and get it out of your scene, do that. Take your pictures the best you can in camera. You don't want weird stuff in the background, like this one. All right. Skip that for now. So great landscape photos can only be taken at dusk and dawn. That golden hour is it. True or false? False. False. This is probably the word that cued you into that, only, whenever you see that, because that is a good rule. But you don't have to do that. I mean, when you're out on a family vacation in Yellowstone and it's nonstop beauty and nonstop landscape photo opportunities, you're not going to say, yeah, I'm only going out at 6 a.m. and again at 6 p.m. You all do what you want. You're not going to do that. You're going to go out. Yeah, I'm going to just stay at the hotel. So, not true. What about you're shooting out at the middle of the day at high noon in the summer? Do you guys ever get pictures that you take in the summer that they're pretty, but the sky basically looks whitish? Like it doesn't have that blue, beautiful sky that you know is there. And that's so frustrating. So if that's your goal, you can use a filter. So we looked at those last week. We looked at the neutral density filter, which was like sunglasses, remember, that you could make darker and darker. And this one, the purpose was allowing you to have your shutter open for a long amount of time without overexposing. So it was, the purpose of this one was like getting those waterfall pictures that are all smooth water, like holding your shutter open. This one is a polarizing filter, and it seems kind of the same as you spin it. You're not seeing any difference, right? Last time I spun, you saw it was like transition lenses that changed. Does anybody have polarized sunglasses? Or heard of them?
Mm-hmm.
What's the beauty of them?
Actually,
Anybody?
They like black the sun and reflect the light.
Yeah.
can't see screens.
You can't see, they have to do with the glare and reflections. So any reflection coming off of like water will be eliminated. So people who fish love them because they can see into the water. It's not all bright.
Polarized glasses.
Yes, polarized
I got
lenses.
a pair at home.
Exactly. So if they cut down glare, and they also light that's being reflected that like the blue sky ends up showing up whitish in our pictures. It's just ugly. This changes it. It makes it be that cool look. So
You actually
these,
put that over your lens?
huh?
Put that over your
Yeah,
lens?
you actually, I was just going to say, you screw it on. The end of your lenses is where you screw on these filters. And they have to be the same size as your lens. And if they aren't, it won't fit. So this is the right one. Some of my lenses are bigger, so you have to buy these in a size that matches your lens. But when you put it on and you're using it, you actually spin it. And it doesn't get darker, but it starts cutting. If the sun rays are coming down and bouncing off the water and making that glare, I don't know how it does it, but it changes them so that glare is gone. So as you spin it, the water goes from being all bright glare to being,
So
like-
basically, it is almost like an optical lens because that's what the doctors do. They tweak it and turn it.
yeah, you tweak and turn it through the lens. And it also makes the sky darker. So here's an example of shots taken at high noon. This is what you'd see in real life, right? But your pictures probably would look icky. They would look more plain up here. They wouldn't have that blue, beautiful sky. So by using this lens, you look through your viewfinder and you spin it, and the sky is going to get bluer and bluer, darker and darker until you get it where you want it and you take the picture. Here's an example that I took, just showing with water too. See how there's no glare.
None.
Isn't that crazy? It's not what it looked like, but by spinning this, I eventually got it where the sky was the gorgeous blue that it really was in real life, and the water had no glare on it. I should have taken this off and tried it.
I have one that spins too. I didn't realize it's one.
Yeah, that's probably what it is then. So these are polarizing filters, just like polarized sunglasses, for those of you that have ever seen them. When they sell those, like Maui Jim is a brand that comes to mind, they always have this picture next to their glasses case that you should try on. And it's like this weird backlit, and there's glass on the front, and you look at it and you see nothing. You see a glare. You put on your Maui Jim glasses, you see right through the glare, and you see their little parrot sitting behind there, whatever their logo is. It's crazy. So polarizing filters can be really good if you're going to take shots like this out during the summer, because trust me, you don't get that good sky at all. The neutral density filter we talked about last week, that's the one that allows you to leave your shutter open for longer periods of time and not overexpose, and that gives you that blur that you're seeing down there. And then there's also something called a graduated neutral density filter, and if you can see from the image right here, the top of it is tinted, but then the bottom of it isn't. I want you guys, when you go out to leave today, to look at your car. You probably have this on your windshield. The very top of it is typically tinted. You don't even think about it. Way up here, and then it gradually comes down to being clear. Same thing here. So you have to screw this on your lens so that it's at the level point, obviously. But what it's going to do is it's going to give you that awesome filtering up here to get all this detail. And then it's going to gradually go away, and the lower half of your image is going to be exposed normal, how it normally would.
So what's the purpose of it? Is that to keep the light from coming in your car so high?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah, it's like sunglasses on your windshield.
Regular glasses used to be like, that was the big thing in the
Yes.
80s.
Yeah, you're right.
My grandma had those, the big oval size
Yes.
half were purple. And
Yes, they cover down to your cheekbone too. So here's another version, because people that are really into photography have lots of different lenses, and like I said, this size is different. So you buy your screw-on lenses based on this. So you'd have to buy multiple polarizing filters if you had different size lenses. So some of them will buy these glass pieces instead, and then buy this bracket that fits on your lens, and then you slide it down into this bracket, and you can use it on a variety of different size lenses. But do you guys see, this is an exact example of what we would get in real life. Here's the shot. Notice how the sky's all blown out? This is how it gets recorded to get detail here. But using this neutral polarizing filter, this is a neutral density actually. You see how it got all the blue, all that weird reflected light up here, instead of being white, comes in to be the blue that it should be. So it does a much better job of recording that.
You took those pictures?
No, no, not those. So that's a good example too of no filter with a little bit. Cool thing is we can do this after the fact in Adobe Camera Raw, which we're going to use. Even if your picture isn't a RAW file, if it's a JPEG, we can force it to open in Adobe Camera Raw. And there's this option of adding a neutral density filter, and it's basically like a roll, like a shade. We'll click up here, and then we'll pull down, and the darkening will happen until we stop, and it will be gradual. So we'll get this effect on this picture in Adobe Camera Raw after the fact. That's one of my favorite things. All right. Let's pretend now, shrink that down, that we are going on a trip somewhere. And
Can we actually though?
no. Well, we're going to go out in a minute, but where do you guys want to go on an exotic trip for pretend? Huh?
Brazil.
Belize, Brazil? Okay. Travel photography, this one.
Some tropical adventure.
Let's go to Belize.
Siberia.
No, we're not going to Siberia.
North
I say no.
Can we go to the country of Jordan? Nice
Maybe
blue
the
sky in
United.
Siberia.
Let's go to North Korea. I heard it's beautiful.
Should I get like a tattoo of it over?
I would.
My friend Montana got
All right, so we're going to go somewhere far away that we're not going to get back to next weekend. We can't recreate our shots. We're going to think in terms of, like, this is a big deal, travel photography. So we're going to Belize and then Brazil. First thing you might want to think of is packing your camera bag accordingly, because what happens if I forget my battery charger?
Enjoy it.
Dun, dun, dun. And guess what? My point and shoot and my SLR are different. And this is what I need to survive in Belize and Brazil. I can't take any more pictures. I can't probably go out and buy one of these, nor would I want to, even if I could. So remembering chargers is important. Remembering cards, SD cards, is important. Remembering a cable, perhaps, to go to your laptop to get your pictures off. Remembering your laptop is important. So, laptop charger, exactly. It's, in a way, we're like, oh, it's so awesome to go digital. I'm like, oh my God, I have to remember all these things, and if you forget one, you're in trouble. I went to Ireland 2 years in a row with the study abroad thing from here, and somebody forgot this, and we ended up walking around Dublin trying to find a camera shop that would sell the right charger, and it's just ridiculous. Like, we're lucky we found it. Otherwise, think of all those pictures she would not have gotten because she forgot her charger. So, make a packing list. This one cracks me up because it's Scott Kelby, the guy who writes our books, and he takes things like sandbags, model releases, stuff like that. But if you're a photographer, and this is stuff you need to work, why not have a little list that you can print out and remind yourself? But extra batteries, charge them all, clear out your memory cards, have all this stuff that you need. This is not what we would pack, but it's certainly, the idea is the same. Make sure you have what you need. Also, feel free when you're on vacation to allow yourself to shoot in that program mode, or P. It's not auto where your camera's doing everything. P is where you make some decisions. Like you can change the ISO, you can do flash fill. But the thing about P is that it allows you to get the shot without worrying about anything else. So we're in Belize and they tell us that the dolphins are about to all jump up at the same time, and it happens one time a day, once every 5 weeks. Do we want to be looking down at our camera going, oh, should I be in sport mode or what mode? And there go the dolphins and it's over. Be in that program mode. Get the shots. Don't miss the shots. Then, when you're out floating around on the beach and have all these awesome, beautiful shots, you can take the time and say, I need to be in aperture priority mode now. I want to get this cool shot. Or, here comes a speedboat. I want to do some cool action shot with it, and I want to be in sport mode, or I want to be in shutter priority mode. To be safe, be okay with shooting in that program mode to get the shots and not miss them. Depending where you are, the people photos. So the people of Brazil, of whatever little village you happen to be in, these kind of tell the story, tell the flavor of where you are. The people of Belize. If you take this shot with a zoom lens, you're 100 feet back, she never hears the click, click. No harm, no foul. If she's looking right at you and you're taking her picture, is that kind of creepy, or could it be?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a fine line between being weird and it being okay. So when you're out in public, if you're at a park, if you're on a city street, you're walking around in New Orleans and people have their cameras, you're fair game, right? Legally, you're fair game.
What, paparazzi?
Yeah, right? You're fair game if you're out wherever. However, if you're at a park in Belize and you're taking pictures of a little kid and you didn't bother to say anything to the mom or dad, it's kind of creepy. Yeah, exactly. So common sense has to prevail. Ask people if you can take their photo, or you just want a shot of them working, making baskets, whatever. But you want to try to capture the storytelling. It's all about storytelling. Have any of you sat down with people after they've taken a trip and they want to go through all 700 photos with you
Yes.
and tell you the whole story behind it all? And it's exhausting, right? The picture needs to tell the story for you. You might have some backstory to it, but make your pictures tell the story and really capture the feeling of wherever you are. So keep in mind, you can shoot all day. You don't have to say that golden hour is the only time I'm going out. That's not true. The benefit of open shade. If you're in New York City, all the tall skyscrapers, by the time you're down on street level, there aren't spots of sun coming through. It's just shade. It's all equal lighting or diffuse lighting. Morning is always best to get out the quiet time, clean streets, clean whatever. And then, kind of important, delete your dud photos, especially on your camera as you're taking them or when you sit back down for a few minutes. Because if you fill up your memory card and you know you've got like 40 duds on there throughout the day, and now the coolest thing happens, the dolphins all come back and they stand up and they're clapping for you, and you don't have any room on your SD card, dun, 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 you're sad, right?
So they made an exception for you one time.
They did. And you missed it because you ran out of card space. Be bold. Look for bold colors. Look for things that tell a story. Take these close-up detail shots. Taking pictures of food. I know that's kind of a normal thing now with Instagram and all that jazz. Like even your lunch you're going to go take a picture of. But when you're in a different country especially, capture everything about it. Get cool pictures.
A Porsche moped?
Looks like.
That
That's
might be
fun.
a fake
Ferrari
Ferrari.
moped, yeah.
Maybe it's just a
Ferrari, my bad.
sticker.
No, I'm
Yeah.
That might be a fake Ferrari.
The other
Yeah.
thing
Way.
Now,
is
that's
just
a
Different
right
country
there.
of origin.
take photos of signs.
Fine one
Let's
there.
pretend we go to Germany. I've heard there's a few castles there, and like people go out and look at castles, right? You get back and you have 700 pictures of different castles, but you don't know which is which anymore. If you take a shot every now and then of what it is or what the thing is about, or if we're in Brazil and there's this big placard talking about how old this forest is, take a picture of it. You can always look at it on your screen and refresh your memory about things. Plus it helps kind of timestamp where you were and what you took pictures of. Some of your cameras might have GPS geotagging on them, where it can record the GPS coordinates of where you took that shot, which is pretty cool too. So that's something to think about. The landmark photos. If you're in San Francisco, you got to get the Golden Gate Bridge, but maybe think of doing it in a different way, a unique way. So a reflection in a puddle. showing the Eiffel Tower is a pretty famous picture I've seen quite a few times. It's just the puddle, but you see the whole Eiffel Tower here in the sunglasses. If you can, go get really high vantage points. Go up to towers and observation decks or whatever. If you're looking for what's the money shot, look at the postcards they sell. That's usually the money shot, right? It's the coolest view in the area. So maybe you can go and recreate that. Maybe not. Maybe they took it in a helicopter or something, or a drone. But maybe you can go and recreate that all on your own. If you're in a city, a big city, that rule of natural light can still apply. So those dusk and dawn golden hour shots, even in cities, can be really gorgeous. Try different perspectives, and if you can, if you own them, or if your camera shifts, kind of fakes it, different lenses, a fisheye lens, you know, gives you some weird thing like this. So look for different things. Also look for the really unique shots. So they sell this thing. Did we talk about this last week? That clear ball thing that you can take pictures through? Yeah. How about, anybody heard of a GorillaPod? It's a tripod about this tall, and the 3 legs are bendable completely. They've got like little knuckles every inch, so you can bend it around. Like we could put it around this pole right here, hook our camera to it, and it would be a tripod from a different angle or hanging out over something. So
I would not trust that.
I would be
Hanging
scared.
it out over
Yeah, I know. Especially an SLR that's heavy. It's like, oh. So, scout out your night shots during the day. Go when it's safe. Go when you can see around. Go when you can plan your attack and know how long it's going to take to get there and where you can set up. You don't want to just show up at night and try to get that shot and hope everything's going to be good. Shooting night scenes like a cityscape, this is very much the same idea as the sunset, where you're not metering on the darkest point and you're not metering on the brightest point. You're kind of metering on that midpoint, and then after you take it, it says, take a shot, check your LCD screen. Now remember, it's going to be improved so we can see it. Look at your histogram. If you still have way too much in the dark or you've blown out your whites, shift your settings a little bit and try it again and again. You can be creative with white balance. We know that. Some things to know when you travel. A lot of places tripods are not allowed. You can't bring a tripod into museums. You can't bring it onto the New York subways. But a monopod, which is just that stick, tends to be allowed because it doesn't, you know, it's still in your body space. It's not sticking out, tripping people. So you could probably take a monopod. Flash photography is a no-no in most museums, some churches, whatever. So you're going to have to think about how can I get those low light shots. And that's where that cheap, super fast lens that I mentioned, like that fixed 50 lens, that prime lens that goes down to 1.8, that will allow you to get in as much light as humanly possible without using your flash. So that can be a great lens to have when you travel also. That's the same thing. All right. That concludes the